You're here.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks for your patience with all of
Oh my
this. I'm
goodness.
so excited. Well, why don't you, since I rambled for a while already, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your story and your ministry and your book. And then I'm really excited about our art project. I've got my pen and paper here.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Yeah. So for people who are just joining, we'll do an art project. Well, it's really just a doodle project, just to keep it simple, and we'll get to that shortly. So, yeah, as Jen was introducing me, I'm Danica Thurber, and I'm with a, well, my husband and I founded a thing called Project Grief. My background is as a artist and as a therapeutic art life coach. So I believe that because loss and grief take us beyond words, we have to go beyond words to heal. It just makes sense. And so that's where art comes in. My experience with loss starts pretty early on. I lost my dad at 12, as you know, Jen, and it was a traumatic loss because he was 46 and it was a massive heart attack. That grief was crazy, shock and denial and all kinds of crazy things. And just a year later, my grandma, who we were very close with, she just lived 2 minutes down the street, she was diagnosed with a rare lymphoma. So knowing that, we knew that her time was limited. Her body started to deteriorate pretty quickly. And within a year and a half, we lost her. And having just experienced grief, I had the chance to really notice how different with my grandma. It was like we were grieving while she was still with us. And her death became a relief because of the pain that she was in. Whereas my dad, the death was a shock. It was totally different. And so in my exploration of grief and loss and leading people through, I started to really, I don't know, just address different grief issues. And I think this is a big one that we don't often talk about as the holidays come, right? There's
It's a big time to address that again.
Yeah. The anxiety of, maybe this is the first holidays without your loved one. Maybe you're anticipating just the other losses, like loss of income, during the winter, slow months. Maybe loss of the traditions that you've always had that are totally different now because of COVID. That's anticipatory grief too. You're anticipating a loss. And so that's what we're talking about today. So we can just head right into our art activity. So if you're just joining us, go ahead and grab a piece of paper and a pen. It's cool to be not on the other side, because there's not an other side of grief or loss, but to be the helper now, helping people work through their grief. That's not really an other side. It's more of a co-journey person.
Yeah.
It's cool to be able to go back to that space with healing, and with new perspective to be able to help others.
It sort of adds an extra purpose to it.
It does, yeah.
That you can kind of pay it forward, or be able to help somebody through something that you might not have had the help through that you wish you would have.
Exactly, yeah. And Jen mentioned this, but had our first children's book published, and it's about my story with my grandma. So this little girl, she's 8 years old, and she's going through the loss of her grandma. You're watching grandma slowly lose the bodily functions, and just experiencing it through her eyes. So it's facing loss and finding encouragement. I think it's a weird pairing, but I think it's a helpful perspective for people going through loss.
And you wrote and illustrated that, right?
Yes. Yeah. Because I'm an artist.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah. For anyone without an artistic streak like us, I just want to encourage you too that when we do grief art, it's different than fine art. So when I'm wearing my fine art hat, I'm making something professional looking. It's always polished. It has lots of layers. It takes a long time, and its value is in the value that people assign it. If they're commissioning or purchasing it. But when I'm doing grief art, I'm wearing a different hat. I'm focused on the process. It doesn't have to look beautiful at the end. And I like to say, you know, if it turns out ugly or messy, good job. You've just expressed what grief looks like.
Right.
So with that, I mean, you know, you're free to participate in this activity as you have, but I think it's really freeing to know that it's about the process you go through, not the final product when we're doing grief art. So, all right, let's go ahead. So let's start with a banana shape because that's a canoe. You like this? That's a horrible banana, but you know, it's about the process, not the product. So start with that. And then we got the little posts of the canoe. So we got that like up, down, up, down.
Oh, like the frame of it?
Uh-huh, yeah, that. I'm not official.
Sounds good.
And then we've got the water. So you can do the like little wave thing, you know, like do. And then let's do the other side of the river, you know, like that. Yay, it's a canoe in a river. So our first stop on our expedition is to look at the water. So in the water, I'll just give you like a couple minutes, or probably just a minute, to write or draw what you're feeling. So especially right now, I'm going to start with, I'll just talk through this and you can write your own or wherever you're at. I'm just going to talk through it. So I'm going to put anxiety because that's all about anticipatory grief, holidays, busy season right now at work. All kinds of anxiety down there. I feel like just making a scribble. That's like stress. Sometimes a scribble symbolizes grief because I'm kind of like balled up inside myself. I'm feeling sad. Honestly, the things that our nation's going through in the U.S. here, and watching friends and people that I know suffer from COVID. I'm thinking about my grandma and grandpa who love the holidays. Sometimes I feel angry, so I'll put anger in there. The injustice of it all, you know, why did I have to lose my dad when I was little? Why did grandma have to pass so soon after? So, anger. Can you share maybe one of your emotions, Jen, that you put in here?
Sure. I was more coming up with like thoughts. I can remember when my grandpa was dying, and I wanted to isolate. I didn't know what to do. I was thinking like, why him? And now like one of my dogs died, and just really wanting to. I knew she was dying, and I could make sure I got to the lake in that time. And it was really hard to go to the lake, but it was like, yes, I want one more really good memory. So some of it was, I was a little more intentional. But yeah, some of those kinds of feelings, and yeah.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah, wanting to be present. I mean, it doesn't always have to be like negative.
Yeah.
It's like seize the moment, you know?
Yeah.
Like, because you don't know how many you got left. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what we do with this, the reason why we put the emotions in the water is that emotions are a state of being that we can pass through. And once, like, seize the moment, you know, maybe we don't want to pass through, but that's okay. Like, we can pass through and we can pass through again. Because you might not always want to seize the moment. You want to just sometimes speed through, just be done, you know. So we're going to give some movement to the water. So from each word or thought you've got, do a little trail behind it to show that it's moving. So we have to begin, you know, where we're at, and that's where we're at. So in the inside of the boat, what we're going to write is questions we're thinking through, like, what am I going to do when, you know, that situation you're anticipating. You're going to write burdens, responsibilities you have, like make sure the dog gets fed every day, you know, like whatever, you know, the things that are weighing on your mind. You can think of them as cargo.
Would some of that cargo, like having to make decisions, like if you're the main caretaker?
Totally. Yeah, oftentimes with a loss that you're anticipating, there's going to be a change of roles with the loss. Maybe who's the financial bringer in the house. I don't know how you'd say that. Who's taking care, transferring roles for kids and all kinds of things.
Yeah. Or medical decisions and
exactly. Yeah. So questions you're thinking through, burdens you feel, responsibilities. Questions, responsibilities. Might be stresses too, burdens.
It's interesting writing down some of the cargo. It makes me think of the other emotions that need to go back in the river. So I keep finding myself adding it back. Going back and going, oh yeah, that was one of my other emotions.
When you think of the thing, you're like, oh, that's how I feel about the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Or you can look, if you're kind of stumped, you can look at the emotions and be like, okay, what's causing me overwhelm right now? And that's
life and career change.
Burden.
Yeah.
Responsibility, cargo. We'll give it a finish that. And again, anyone who's just joined, we're talking about anticipatory grief. So maybe the loss hasn't happened yet, or maybe it has, and you're anticipating a life without your loved one. So that's still anticipatory grief, stress, anxiety, all of those things. That's what we're talking about today. So we begin with the river by identifying what we're feeling right now, because emotions are things we pass through, and they carry us too. So we're writing the emotions in the river, little ripples to show their movement. And then in the boat, we're showing our responsibilities, our burdens, our questions, our stresses. And that represents cargo. Oftentimes, a loss means a lot of other changes. Those are called secondary losses because they're not the original loss, the death of the loved one. That's the big one. But the secondary stuff is the stuff that had to change when it was attached to it. It is true. You can grieve before that person's gone. I certainly have experienced that myself. And have you too, Jen?
Yeah. I get asked that all the time with clients. So I'm like, yeah, this is the grief before the loss is sometimes, I think, harder because it's so mixed. It's
so
part of you wants it to be done and then you feel bad. That's right.
So we're on the boat. We've got cargo. Let's pretend that there's rapids up ahead in our little river metaphor. That's the anticipation, the thing that we're anticipating, right? The loss, the holidays, whatever event is up ahead. In order to survive those rapids, we got to lighten our load. That's how we're not going to sink when we go into the rapids. So I want you to look at every single piece of cargo that you wrote down and see, is there anything at all that I can throw overboard? So there might be maybe parts of it, like I need to, like a job change. Sarah mentioned that. Maybe I can't throw away all the job change. Like I need a job, but maybe I can postpone it till January. So like the stress of finding a job now is what's stressing me, but maybe I can wait and live off of my savings or unemployment, whatever, until January. So, it might just be partly tossing over the cargo, not entirely. So think through each of those items. What can you toss over? And some things legitimately do need to stay in your boat. We're not tossing everything overboard because there's things we'll need on the other side of those rapids in order to survive. And we ourselves are not jumping out of the boat either. So we need stuff to sustain us. But what can we do to lighten the load? That's what we're talking about.
When you say you could dump it overboard, do you mean some of it could be postponed or it could be like delegated to somebody else? Or maybe you don't really have to clean the dishes tonight?
Yeah. Dumping it overboard might not look like never ever doing it. It's more like dumping the load that's on your shoulders, This isn't an actual boat. It's actually living here. And here.
Lots lives right there. Yeah. Yeah.
So we've got the ocean or the river of our emotions, what we're feeling. We've got the boat and the things that are creating the stress or the loading the burden. We've got the rapids up ahead. We're like, wow. No, what would make me feel better in this situation? An oar.
That could be awesome.
This right here would feel so out of control, right? The river is what's driving all of this direction. And so no wonder we feel stressed and fearful and scared and angry and all of those things. We're floating on the rivers of our emotions. We've got no way to stop it or to change direction or to change pace. So let's draw in an oar. So I'm going to do like a little line here. I'll show you how we can draw an oar if you want. So an oar looks just like a spoon. It's got a long handle, and then a little whiteboard markers catching up like this, or a shovel.
Well, the important thing is it's an oar, right? Doesn't matter if it looks like one to somebody else or not.
You're all like the situation. Exactly. So the oar is the symbol of direction and strength. So I'll write that direction because you can paddle to turn yourself, and strength, so it's the fuel. You can also say energy. So that's what takes you forward. River takes you forward too, but the oar is the power behind it. So that leads us to think, what in my life gives me direction? And what in my life gives me strength and energy? Because I'll bet if you are really battling anticipatory grief right now, your oar is probably either weak or non-existent. Or maybe you just have one and you need two, we can always put another one in there behind the boat. So what in your life gives you direction? What in your life gives you strength and energy? I find a lot of direction in my spirituality. So for me, that's praying, reading scripture, talking to people at church, in my community. Maybe if you're not a person of faith, you might find that from a really good group of friends, from meditation, books, people who've walked down these paths. We can read what they've said and get some direction for our lives as well. So.
Yeah, so for me, it's like going for a walk in the woods or being alone. Even sometimes I feel like a distracting thing, like watching a silly movie or a really sappy movie that just totally takes me like away from everything I'm trying to carry. Gives me a chance to kind of recharge my batteries and get a fresh look at something.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like a perspective changer. And I think some of those things you mentioned too would be sources of strength and energy, like clearing your mind through nature walks and things. I love doing that without headphones. I challenge our people listening to try it without headphones. It's sometimes hard if you're used to like silencing yourself with noise. But that quietness, that's where you get direction and strength.
My grief connection said naps.
Amen.
A little extra self-care. Yeah.
Such a good source of strength and energy.
Having a little bit of some internet glitches. Hold on, because we got to find out how do we wrap up our art project here. The emotions and the waves, the burdens in the boat, then the power, direction, energy, and the oars. All right, she's back. Yay. Meditation and prayer. That's a good one too.
So if we've done all of these steps, I'll bet you we're so much better equipped to face the rapids that are coming down the river. It doesn't take away the rapids. And I think that's important to realize, there's so much stuff that we can't control, but we can control what's in our boat and what's in our hands. Even the emotions that we're feeling, we can't always control, And so we've got to learn to ride the waves. There's a word called Equinanymus.
That's a good word for the day.
Equinanymus is being able to weather the ups and downs. And so in that I've kind of repeated for myself is I am equinanimous, able to weather many storms. So it's just a helpful idea that I can't take away the storms. I can't run from all the storms. But I can weather them, and I can weather them well, and I can help others learn to weather them well. So that's our word for the day, equinanimous. So I guess I'll finish by sharing a little bit of my book. This book is really about my experience with anticipatory grief. It's about me as a child, going through the grief of losing my grandma and watching her die. So it's a hard book, but I think it's an important book. This is the one that I wish I could have had when I was going through the loss of my grandma, because it shows this slow loss of body function, and it doesn't sweep it under the rug with euphemisms, you know, oh, grandma's in heaven now, you know, like all the things that we want to do to protect the children. So it doesn't do that. It shows it honestly, but it shows it in an age-appropriate, helpful way that helps the child understand how they face loss. So I was sharing how Lulu makes this project for her grandma. It's she embarks on basically an adventure to find how she can encourage her. And she does that because she learns a new word, encouragement, which means giving hope to someone and helping them on the inside.
Love that.
So encouragement is important because I think people who are going through loss or who've gone through loss, encouragement is about helping strengthen somebody on the inside. And at the end, there's instructions to make your own encouragement flowers, the same ones that Lulu makes in the book. So that gives kids and adults a tangible way to work through that encouragement. Though Lulu gives her gifts to her grandma and her grandma passes, she ends up finding encouragement by remembering grandma through that gift that she made her. So it's a gift that keeps on giving. So that's what I made. And I hope that it would be a really amazing resource for other kids who are going through this right now. Especially with COVID, a lot of grandparents have passed. And so my heart goes out to the little ones and the older ones who are going through anticipatory grief right now. So I hope this book can be an encouragement to them. And you can find it on my profile, Project Grief Art, in my link in the bio. So that's me.
Awesome. Well, and it's so nice to have a book when you're going through something hard like that, because you get that snuggle, read a book time, and you can talk about harder issues because it's introduced as a character's issue. And so thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and I will put links to all of your sites and everything in the comments to this. And if anybody wants to sign up for my newsletter, I'm going to put out a weekly newsletter after these lives. My notes from the live and kind of step-by-step through the art activity. I'll also include maybe some reflection questions to help take it a little further. So that'll be on my website on hopeandhealingathome.com. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for being patient, everyone. Everybody have a great night and a good weekend.
Thanks so much, Jen. Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome. Yeah, bye.
Bye.